The call came at 2:47 p.m. on a Tuesday that started like every other Tuesday in my carefully orchestrated life. I was Luke Harper, 43 years old, sitting in my home office surrounded by 6 monitors displaying hotel security feeds from Portland to Bar Harbor. To my wife Elise, I ran a small home automation business. To the FBI's Financial Crimes Task Force, I was their best-kept secret, a cyber surveillance specialist embedded in Maine's hospitality industry, tracking money laundering operations through luxury hotels. "Mr. Harper?" The voice belonged to Marcus, the concierge at the Blue Heron Hotel downtown. "Sir, your wife just checked into our penthouse suite. She's not alone." I leaned back in my ergonomic chair, watching the timestamp tick forward on my primary screen. "Room 1247? "Yes, sir." She registered under the name Sarah Mitchell. Her companion is Graham Dalton, the corporate lawyer from Dalton, Pierce & Associates. What Marcus didn't know was that I owned every camera, every keycard reader, and every Wi-Fi access point in that hotel. The Blue Heron wasn't just another client. It was my hunting ground, specifically chosen because wealthy criminals loved its discretion and luxury. What my wife Elise didn't know was that she'd just walked into the most surveilled building in New England. "Thank you, Marcus. Maintain normal operations." I hung up and activated my surveillance matrix. 14 months. That's how long the affair had been running, according to the digital breadcrumbs I'd been collecting. Hotel keycard logs, Wi-Fi timestamps, credit card transactions, all painting a picture of systematic betrayal. But today was different. Today, they'd gotten careless. The penthouse suite came alive on my screens. High-definition cameras I'd installed during a routine security upgrade last spring captured everything. Elise, 38 years old, still beautiful in that sharp-edged way that had first attracted me, was already undressing. Graham Dalton, 41, married, father of 2, was popping champagne like he'd won the lottery. "To freedom," Graham said, raising his glass. "To Luke being too stupid to figure it out," Elise replied, clinking glasses. I activated the audio enhancement software. Time to hear what my marriage was really worth. "The domestic violence complaint is ready," Graham continued. "Judge Morrison owes me 3 favors. We'll have you a restraining order by Friday, full custody by Christmas, and half of everything Luke owns by Valentine's Day." Elise laughed, a sound I used to love. "What about the business? His little computer thing?" "That's the beautiful part. My forensic accountant found irregularities in his books. Nothing criminal, but enough to freeze assets during litigation. By the time we're done, Luke Harper will be lucky to afford a studio apartment." I watched my wife of 12 years plan my destruction with the same enthusiasm she once planned our anniversary dinners. The irony wasn't lost on me. They were plotting to frame me for domestic violence while committing conspiracy and fraud in a room I'd wired specifically to catch criminals. My phone buzzed. Pete Kowalski, my best friend and manager of O'Malley's Pub, where half the town gathered to gossip. "Luke, you need to hear this. Vanessa Chen was just in here, drunk and talking. Your wife's been telling people you hit her." Vanessa, Elise's best friend since college, her confidant and enabler. I'd always suspected she knew about the affair. What exactly did she say? That Elise is scared, that she's been covering bruises with makeup. "Luke, I've known you for 20 years. You wouldn't hurt a fly. But people are starting to talk." I returned to the screens. Graham was on his phone now, pacing naked across my field of view. "Yes, Judge Morrison, the Harper case. We'll need an emergency hearing. Domestic violence. Yes, she's very convincing. No evidence. But you know how these things go." Perfect. I started recording everything. The next call was to my FBI handler, Agent Sarah Reynolds, using our established protocol. "Harper here. I need to accelerate the Blue Heron operation. Personal circumstances." "Luke, you know we can't compromise an 18-month investigation for—" "They're targeting federal assets. My surveillance network. If they freeze my business, they'll discover the government contracts. Silence. Then, what do you need? 48 hours to clean house? Then you can have Dalton and his money laundering network. Approved. But Luke, don't do anything stupid. I hung up and smiled for the first time in months. Graham Dalton had no idea he'd been washing cartel money through the same hotels I'd been monitoring. My wife had no idea her lover was about to become a federal case study. And neither of them had any idea that the stupid husband they were destroying had spent 2 years building an unbreakable case against them. Time to show them what stupid looked like. By 6 p.m., I had everything. 14 months of evidence, meticulously cataloged and cross-referenced. The beauty of being a cyber surveillance specialist was that people always underestimated the digital traces they left behind. Graham's shell company, Coastal Consulting LLC, had been routing my marital assets offshore since last spring. Small amounts at first, $5,000 here, $3,000 there, but building to larger transfers. The total was staggering. $847,000 of our joint savings, my business profits, even the college fund we'd started for the children we never had. Elise had been the inside source, providing account numbers and financial documents. Her phone's cloud backup, which she'd never bothered to secure, contained photos of bank statements, investment portfolios, and business contracts. All sent to Graham via encrypted messaging apps that weren't nearly as secure as they thought. But the real treasure was Graham's client communications. As a corporate lawyer, he represented 3 sitting judges, the county prosecutor, and half the city council. The same judges who would hear our divorce case, the same prosecutor who would handle any domestic violence charges. I pulled up the most damning conversation, recorded just 2 hours ago in the penthouse suite. "Morrison will sign the restraining order without reading it," Graham had said. "I've been covering his gambling debts for 3 years. He's completely compromised." "What about evidence?" Elise had asked. "We don't need evidence. I'll coach you on what to say. A few tears, some manufactured bruises, maybe a photo of you looking scared. Domestic violence cases are all about emotion, not facts." I leaned back, processing the magnitude of their conspiracy. They weren't just destroying my marriage, they were corrupting the entire legal system to do it. My neighbor Rita Kowalski knocked on my front door. At 72, she saw everything that happened on Maple Street from her kitchen window. "Luke, honey, you've got company." I minimized my screens and opened the door. Rita held a casserole dish and wore her concerned grandmother expression. "Elise hasn't been home in 3 days. The mailman's asking questions." "Business trip," I lied smoothly. "She'll be back Friday." Rita's sharp eyes studied my face. "Luke, I've lived next door for 8 years. I know when something's wrong. That girl's been sneaking around for months. Different cars in the driveway, lights on at strange hours when you're not home." I invited her in, calculating risks. Rita was the neighborhood's unofficial intelligence network. If I played this right, she could be an asset. "Rita, if I told you Elise was having an affair, would you be surprised?" She snorted. "Honey, I've been waiting for you to figure it out. That lawyer's been coming around since last Christmas. Fancy car, expensive suits, thinks he's God's gift." "You know about Graham?" "Graham Dalton. I looked him up after the 3rd visit. Married to Jennifer Dalton, 2 kids in private school. His wife's a real estate agent. Sold the Morrison house last year." Judge Morrison. The same Judge Graham was bribing. Rita's casual intelligence gathering had just connected another piece of the puzzle. "Rita, I need a favor. If anyone asks, you've seen me home every night this week. Can you do that?" She smiled. "Luke, I've been covering for cheating spouses longer than you've been alive, but this time, I'm covering for the good guy." After Rita left, I returned to my screens. Elise and Graham were ordering room service, planning their evening like a real couple. The irony was perfect. They were celebrating their victory in the very room where I was documenting their crimes. My phone rang. Jennifer Dalton. "Mr. Harper, this is Jennifer Dalton, Graham's wife. I think we need to talk." My blood went cold. "About what?" "About what our spouses are doing in the penthouse suite at the Blue Heron Hotel. I've been tracking Graham's credit cards for 6 months. I know about the affair, the money transfers, everything." "How did you get my number?" "I'm a real estate agent, Mr. Harper. I know how to find people. Can we meet?" An hour later, Jennifer Dalton sat in my living room, studying my surveillance setup with professional interest. She was 40, blonde, and furious in the controlled way that came from months of planning. "I've been building my own case," she said, producing a thick folder. "Bank records, credit card statements, hotel receipts. Graham thinks he's clever, but he's been using our joint accounts to fund his affair." "You know about the money laundering?" Her eyes sharpened. "What money laundering?" I made a decision that would change everything. "Jennifer, your husband isn't just stealing from me. He's washing money for some very dangerous people. The FBI has been watching him for 18 months. "Your FBI?" "Contractor, cyber surveillance. The hotel operation is a federal sting, and your husband just became the star witness against himself." Jennifer was quiet for a long moment. Then she smiled, an expression that reminded me why I'd always liked her during the few social occasions we'd shared. "Mr. Harper, I think we can help each other." Thursday morning brought the first phase of my counterattack. While Elise thought I was attending a security conference in Boston, I was actually 3 blocks away, coordinating with Agent Reynolds and finalizing the trap that would destroy my wife's carefully laid plans. "The beauty of this operation," Reynolds explained as we reviewed surveillance footage in the FBI's Portland field office, "is that your wife and Dalton have documented everything themselves. Conspiracy, fraud, bribery, money laundering, we have it all on audio and video. What about the domestic violence allegations? That's where Jennifer Dalton becomes crucial. She's agreed to testify about Graham's history of coaching clients to fabricate abuse claims. Turns out your wife isn't his first victim, just his most ambitious one." I studied the evidence board Reynolds had assembled. Photos of Graham with known cartel associates, financial flowcharts showing money movement through his shell companies, transcripts of conversations recorded in the penthouse suite. My personal betrayal was just one thread in a much larger criminal enterprise. "How long before you move?" "Saturday night. We're letting them execute their plan first. It makes the conspiracy charges bulletproof. Judge Morrison will sign the restraining order Friday afternoon, just like Graham promised. Then we arrest all of them at once." "Including Elise?" Reynolds nodded. "She's not a victim, Luke. She's a co-conspirator who helped steal nearly $1 million in federal surveillance funds. That's a felony." I left the FBI office and drove to O'Malley's pub, where Pete was setting up for the lunch crowd. The bar was empty except for 2 regulars nursing coffee and reading newspapers. "You look like hell," Pete observed, pouring me a coffee. "When's the last time you slept?" "Sleep is overrated. Pete, I need you to do something for me, and I can't explain why." "Name it." "Tomorrow night I want you to organize a poker game. Invite Judge Morrison, County Prosecutor Williams, and City Councilman Bradley. Make sure they're all here at the same time." Pete's eyebrows rose. "That's an interesting guest list. You planning something?" "Justice." At 2 p.m. I received a text from Elise. "Missing you. Conference going well?" I replied, "Great sessions on network security. Home Saturday morning. Love you." The lie tasted bitter, but it was necessary. Elise needed to believe I was safely out of town when she filed her restraining order. My phone buzzed with an encrypted message from Marcus at the hotel. Subjects discussing timeline, recording attached. I opened the audio file and listened to my wife's voice. "Luke gets back Saturday morning. We need to file Friday afternoon right before the courthouse closes. That way he can't respond until Monday, and we'll have the weekend to move his computers and financial records." Graham's response chilled me. My contact at the sheriff's department will serve the papers Saturday at 6 a.m. By the time Luke figures out what's happening, everything will be frozen. He'll be homeless and broke by Sunday night. What if he fights back? With what? We're taking his computers, his files, his access to everything. He's a tech guy, Elise. Without his gadgets, he's nothing. I smiled grimly. They had no idea that my real surveillance network was cloud-based and completely invisible to local law enforcement. Taking my home computers would be like stealing the TV remote while the real controls were hidden in the wall. That evening, I met Jennifer Dalton at a coffee shop in South Portland. She'd been busy. "I filed for divorce this morning," she announced. "Emergency motion for asset protection, citing financial fraud. Graham's accounts are frozen as of 3 p.m. How did he react? He doesn't know yet. I had the papers served at his office while he was with your wife. But here's the beautiful part. I also filed a complaint with the State Bar Association. Detailed allegations of client fraud, judicial bribery, and money laundering. Evidence? Jennifer produced a tablet showing Graham's email account. I've had access to his home computer for months. Every conversation with Judge Morrison, every payoff, every manufactured case. It's all documented. How did you... Real estate agents know a lot about technology, Mr. Harper. I've been recording Graham's phone calls since Christmas. I have him on tape coaching 3 different clients to file false domestic violence claims. I stared at this woman I'd barely known, realizing she'd been running her own investigation parallel to mine. "Jennifer, you're dangerous." "Mr. Harper, they messed with the wrong wives." Friday afternoon, I watched from my car as Elise entered the courthouse with Graham and Vanessa. They emerged an hour later, laughing and celebrating. Judge Morrison had signed the restraining order just as planned. My phone rang immediately. "Luke, it's Pete. You're not going to believe this. Vanessa Chen just walked into my bar, drunk off her ass, telling everyone who'll listen that you beat your wife." "What's the reaction?" "Mixed. Half the people know you better than that. The other half love drama. But Luke, some of your old clients are starting to ask questions about their security systems." That was the real target. My business reputation. Destroy my credibility, and my client base would evaporate. No clients meant no income, which meant no ability to fight back legally. "Pete, remember that poker game tomorrow night?" "Already set up. Morrison, Williams, and Bradley confirmed." "What are you planning?" "To show them what real security looks like." Saturday morning, I sat in my kitchen drinking coffee and waiting for the sheriff's deputy to arrive with the restraining order. At exactly 6 a.m., Deputy Collins knocked on my door. "Mr. Harper, I have a court order requiring you to vacate these premises immediately." I read the document with theatrical surprise. "This says I've been abusing my wife. That's impossible. I've been in Boston all week." "Sir, I'm just serving the papers. You'll need to take it up with the court." "Of course. Can I pack some clothes?" 10 minutes. Supervised. I gathered a suitcase of belongings, making sure Deputy Collins saw me looking confused and devastated. The performance was crucial. I needed to appear as the blind-sided victim Graham and Elise expected. As I loaded my car, Rita appeared on her front porch. "Luke, what's happening?" "Restraining order. Elise claims I've been hitting her." Rita's voice carried across the neighborhood. "That's the biggest load of garbage I've ever heard. Luke Harper wouldn't hurt a fly. I've been watching this house for 8 years, and that boy has never raised his voice, let alone his hand." Perfect. Rita's outrage would spread through the neighborhood by noon. I drove to a hotel across town, not the Blue Heron, where my surveillance operation was still active, and checked in under my federal contractor credentials. Then I opened my laptop and activated the real show. Tonight, Graham Dalton would discover that stealing from a federal cyber surveillance specialist was the worst mistake of his life. Saturday evening, O'Malley's pub buzzed with the carefully orchestrated poker game that would serve as ground zero for my revenge. Judge Morrison, County Prosecutor Williams, and City Councilman Bradley sat around Pete's private table in the back room. unaware they were about to become unwitting participants in the destruction of Graham Dalton's criminal enterprise. I watched from my hotel room through hacked security cameras as Pete served drinks and dealt cards. Each man wore a wireless microphone I'd planted during their coat check, devices so small they'd never notice them. Everything they said would be recorded and transmitted directly to Agent Reynolds. At 8:47 p.m., my phone buzzed with a priority alert. Elise and Graham had returned to the penthouse suite, presumably to celebrate their legal victory. I activated the surveillance matrix and settled in to watch my marriage's final act. To the soon-to-be former Mrs. Harper, Graham toasted, raising champagne. To freedom, Elise replied, and to Luke being exactly as stupid as we thought. They had no idea that their victory was about to become evidence in a federal conspiracy case. Graham's phone rang, his attorney, calling with news that would shatter their celebration. What do you mean, frozen? Graham's voice rose. Jennifer can't freeze our accounts. She doesn't have grounds. I watched his face change as the attorney explained Jennifer's emergency motion, the Bar Association complaint, and the judicial review of his recent cases. How did she get access to my files? Graham demanded. Those emails were encrypted. Elise looked confused. What's wrong? Graham hung up and turned to her, his composure cracking. My wife filed for divorce. She's claiming financial fraud and professional misconduct. She somehow got access to my client communications. What does that mean for us? It means Judge Morrison can't touch our case now. If there's an investigation into judicial bribery, he'll recuse himself from anything involving me. I smiled, watching their perfect plan disintegrate in real time. But the real show was just beginning. At 9:15 p.m., Agent Reynolds activated the next phase. FBI agents entered O'Malley's pub, not to arrest anyone, but to serve federal subpoenas to Judge Morrison, Prosecutor Williams, and Councilman Bradley. The poker game became an impromptu interrogation session, with each man's recorded conversations serving as evidence of their corruption. Pete's cameras captured Morrison's face when agents played back his conversation with Graham about the gambling debts and fixed cases. The judge went pale, then green, then started talking so fast the agents had to tell him to slow down. Meanwhile, in the penthouse suite, Graham's phone rang again. This time, it was his paralegal. Mr. Dalton, there are FBI agents in the office. They have a search warrant for your files. Graham dropped the phone. Elise grabbed his arm. FBI? Why would the FBI care about our divorce? Because your husband, Graham said slowly, is apparently more than just a computer repair guy. I leaned forward, watching realization dawn on their faces. Luke works for the government, Elise whispered. That's why he always had those weird contracts, the classified client meetings. The hotels, Graham said, his voice hollow. He's been watching the hotels, all of them, the money transfers, the client meetings. He's been recording everything. They sat in stunned silence as the magnitude of their situation became clear. They hadn't just betrayed a marriage, they'd attacked a federal operation and stolen government surveillance funds. Graham's phone buzzed with a text message. I'd sent it from an encrypted number. Room 1247, we need to talk. Luke. He's here, Graham said. He's in the hotel. That's impossible. The restraining order is worthless if he's a federal agent. I watched them panic, scrambling to gather their clothes and belongings. But the elevator had been disabled, another feature of my surveillance setup. The only way out was the emergency stairs, which led directly through the hotel lobby, where Agent Reynolds was waiting with a full arrest team. At 9:43 p.m., I left my hotel and drove to the Blue Heron. Time for the final confrontation. I found Elise and Graham trapped in the stairwell between the 10th and 11th floors, arguing in whispers about their next move. I opened the door and stepped into their nightmare. Hello, darling, I said to Elise. Miss me? She stared at me like I'd risen from the dead. Luke, I can explain. Explain what? The affair? The money theft? The plan to frame me for domestic violence? Elise, I've been watching you for 14 months. I have recordings of every conversation, copies of every financial transfer, evidence of every crime you've committed. Graham tried to push past me. I stepped aside and let him see Agent Reynolds and 6 federal agents waiting in the lobby below. Going somewhere, Graham? I thought you might want to meet my colleagues first. You're FBI, he said. Contractor, cyber surveillance specialist. The Blue Heron isn't just a hotel, Graham. It's a federal monitoring station. You've been washing cartel money through a government sting operation. Elise sank onto the stairs, finally understanding. The home automation business. Cover identity. I've been tracking money laundering operations through luxury hotels for 3 years. You picked the worst possible place to conduct your affair. The restraining order is evidence of conspiracy to commit perjury, judicial bribery, and fraud against federal assets. Judge Morrison is downstairs right now, explaining to federal prosecutors how you bought his cooperation. Graham's phone rang. He answered it automatically. Mr. Dalton, this is Agent Reynolds with the FBI. You have 30 seconds to exit the stairwell voluntarily, or we're coming up to get you. I stepped aside, gesturing toward the lobby. After you. The arrest was swift and professional. Graham Dalton, charged with money laundering, conspiracy, judicial bribery, and fraud. Judge Morrison, charged with accepting bribes and corrupting judicial proceedings. Prosecutor Williams, charged with obstruction of justice and conspiracy. And Elise Harper, charged with conspiracy, fraud, and theft of federal surveillance funds. As Agent Reynolds read her rights, Elise looked at me with something between hatred and disbelief. You planned this whole thing. No, Elise, you planned this whole thing. I just documented it. The marriage. Was any of it real? I considered the question as federal agents led her away. It was real until you decided to destroy it. Everything after that was just evidence. Sunday morning, I sat in Agent Reynolds' office reviewing the aftermath of Operation Blue Hour, the FBI's code name for the sting that had netted Graham Dalton's entire criminal network. The scope of the conspiracy was staggering, even by federal standards. 17 defendants, Reynolds reported, sliding a thick folder across her desk. 3 judges, 2 prosecutors, a city councilman, 4 defense attorneys, and half a dozen business executives. Your wife's boyfriend was running the most sophisticated judicial corruption scheme we've seen in Maine. I opened the folder and studied the organizational chart. Graham Dalton sat at the center, connected to every major legal decision in Cumberland County for the past 3 years. Drug cases dismissed, zoning variances approved, custody battles fixed, all for the right price. The cartel connection? Coastal Consulting LLC was washing money for the Sinaloa organization. $2 million over 18 months, laundered through luxury hotel purchases and real estate deals. Your surveillance data provided the roadmap for every transaction. What about Elise? Reynolds' expression softened slightly. She's cooperating, fully, gave us everything, financial records, communications, even Graham's personal files she copied from his home computer. In exchange for what? Reduced charges, conspiracy and fraud instead of money laundering. She's looking at 2 to 5 years instead of 15 to 20. I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no regret, just the hollow emptiness where my marriage used to be. When do I testify? Grand jury is next week. Trial starts in March. But Luke... Reynolds paused. You know this ends your cover identity. After this case, you can't work undercover anymore. I'd expected that. My face would be in newspapers, my federal contractor status public record. The quiet life I'd built in Maine was over. What are my options? Washington, Cybercrimes Division, or private sector. Your skill set is worth 7 figures to the right security firm. I left the FBI office and drove to O'Malley's pub, where Pete was preparing for the Sunday football crowd. The bar felt different now. Smaller, somehow, like a place I'd outgrown. "You look like a man who needs a drink," Pete observed, pouring me a coffee. "I need a new life." The federal thing that complicated? I'd never told Pete the details of my work, just that I had government contracts that required security clearance. Now the whole story would come out in court. "Pete, you're going to read some interesting things about me in the newspapers. Good interesting or bad interesting? Complicated interesting. I wasn't exactly who you thought I was." Pete studied my face. "Luke, I've known you for 20 years. I don't care if you're CIA, FBI, or the guy who fixes the president's computer. You're still the same guy who helped me rebuild this place after the fire, who drove my daughter to the hospital when she broke her arm, who never missed a friend's birthday. Whatever you do for work doesn't change who you are." "Thanks, Pete. Besides," he added with a grin, "having a secret agent as a regular customer is great for business." Monday morning brought the first wave of media attention. Federal sting exposes judicial corruption network dominated the Portland Press Herald's front page, complete with photos of Graham Dalton in handcuffs and a courthouse diagram showing the scope of the conspiracy. My phone rang constantly. Reporters, former clients, curious neighbors. I turned it off and drove to my house on Maple Street, which I could finally reclaim now that the restraining order had been vacated. Rita was waiting on my front porch with another casserole and a knowing smile. "Well, well," she said. "Turns out my neighbor is James Bond." "Not exactly." "Close enough. The whole neighborhood's buzzing. Half the women are asking if you're single now, and the other half want to know if you're hiring." I unlocked my front door and surveyed the damage. Elise had cleaned out her belongings during the brief period when she thought she'd won. Closets empty, jewelry gone, even her books removed from the shelves. The house felt hollow, like a stage set after the play had ended. "She took everything," Rita observed. "Not everything." I led her to my home office, where my surveillance equipment remained untouched. She never understood what any of this was for. What happens now? Now I decide what comes next. Tuesday brought an unexpected visitor. Jennifer Dalton knocked on my door at 8 a.m. carrying coffee and looking remarkably composed for a woman whose husband had just been indicted on federal conspiracy charges. "I wanted to thank you," she said, as we sat in my empty living room, "and to apologize." "For what?" "For not stopping this sooner. I knew Graham was corrupt. I just didn't know how deep it went. If I'd acted earlier, maybe your marriage could have been saved." I considered that. My marriage ended the moment Elise chose to betray it. Everything after that was just paperwork. Still, I'm sorry you got caught in the crossfire of my husband's criminal enterprise. "What will you do now?" Jennifer smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen from her. "Rebuild. The divorce will be finalized next month. I'm keeping the house, the kids, and my real estate business. Graham's assets are forfeit, but I documented my separate property carefully. And professionally? Funny you should ask. The FBI offered me a consulting position, helping them trace real estate transactions in money laundering cases. Turns out my skill set is more valuable than I thought." We sat in comfortable silence, two people who'd survived the wreckage of their spouse's betrayal. "Luke, can I ask you something? Did you love her? Really love her, I mean?" I thought about Elise, the woman I'd married, not the criminal she'd become. Yes, but love isn't enough when the other person decides to destroy everything you've built together. Graham used to say love was for suckers, that smart people married for advantage, not emotion. "How did that work out for him?" Jennifer laughed. "Federal prison and professional disgrace, not exactly the advantage he was looking for." After she left, I walked through my empty house, making mental notes of what needed to be replaced or repaired. The silence was profound, not peaceful but complete. For the first time in months, I could hear myself think clearly. My phone buzzed with a text from Agent Reynolds. "Grand jury convened. Your testimony scheduled for Thursday, 2 p.m. I replied, Ready. And I was. Ready to testify, ready to see justice done, ready to close this chapter and start the next one. The blue hour, that liminal time between day and night when everything changes, was finally ending. Thursday afternoon, I sat in the federal courthouse in Portland, waiting to testify before the grand jury that would formally indict Graham Dalton and his co-conspirators. The hallways buzzed with activity. Prosecutors, defense attorneys, FBI agents, and reporters all orbiting around the biggest corruption case in Maine's history. Agent Reynolds found me in the witness waiting room, reviewing my testimony notes one final time. "How are you holding up?" "I'm ready." "How's the jury responding?" "They're angry. Really angry. When we played the recordings of Graham and your wife planning to frame you for domestic violence, 2 jurors actually gasped out loud." "What about the financial evidence?" "Overwhelming. Your surveillance data traced every dollar from the cartel to Graham's accounts to the judge's gambling debts. The money trail is bulletproof." At 2:15 p.m., I entered the grand jury room and took the oath. 23 citizens of Maine sat in judgment, their faces reflecting a mixture of curiosity and outrage. For the next 2 hours, I walked them through Operation Blue Hour, the surveillance network, the financial crimes, the judicial corruption, and the personal betrayal that had exposed it all. "Mr. Harper," the grand jury foreman asked, "in your professional opinion, could this conspiracy have continued indefinitely without your intervention?" "Yes. Graham Dalton had compromised the entire legal system in Cumberland County. Without federal oversight, there was no mechanism for detecting or prosecuting his crimes." "What was the total financial damage?" "Direct theft from my accounts, $847,000. Estimated cartel money laundering, $2.3 million. Corrupted legal decisions affecting hundreds of cases, incalculable." When I finished testifying, the grand jury deliberated for 18 minutes. The indictments were unanimous. Friday morning brought the arraignments. I watched from the gallery as Graham Dalton, Judge Morrison, Prosecutor Williams, and 12 other defendants entered their pleas. Only Elise had agreed to cooperate. The rest maintained their innocence, despite overwhelming evidence. Graham looked different in his orange jumpsuit, smaller, diminished, stripped of the arrogance that had defined him. When his eyes met mine across the courtroom, I saw something I'd never expected: fear. Elise's arraignment was last. She wore a simple blue dress and looked genuinely remorseful as she formally pleaded guilty to conspiracy and fraud. Her attorney had negotiated well, 3 years in federal prison with possibility of parole in 18 months. As she left the courtroom in handcuffs, Elise stopped and looked at me. "Luke, don't," I said quietly. "Just don't." She nodded and let the marshals lead her away. After the arraignments, I met with Reynolds and the prosecution team for a final debriefing. "The plea agreements are finalized," lead prosecutor Janet Morrison announced. Graham Dalton, 15 years federal prison, disbarment, full restitution. Judge Morrison, 10 years, forfeiture of pension. The others range from 5 to 12 years depending on their level of involvement. "What about the cartel investigation?" "Ongoing. Your surveillance data identified their entire East Coast money laundering network. We're coordinating with DEA and Treasury for a coordinated takedown next month." "And my role?" "Officially concluded. You're free to resume normal life, whatever that looks like now." Saturday evening, I hosted a goodbye dinner at O'Malley's pub. Pete closed the bar to regular customers and invited the small circle of friends who'd supported me through the investigation. Rita brought her famous lasagna. Jennifer Dalton came with her children, who were remarkably resilient considering their father's disgrace. Detective Naylor, who'd quietly assisted the federal investigation, raised the first toast. "To Luke Harper, the man who proved that sometimes the good guys really do win." "To justice," Rita added, "and to neighbors who watch out for each other." "To new beginnings," Jennifer said, raising her glass. I looked around the table at these people who'd become my chosen family, more loyal and trustworthy than the wife who'd betrayed me. For the first time in months, I felt genuinely happy. To friends, I said. The only family that really matters. After dinner, Pete and I sat alone in the empty bar, sharing a final drink. So what's next? Washington? Private sector? Retirement in the Bahamas? Actually, I said, I'm thinking of staying in Maine. Pete's eyebrows rose. Really? After everything that's happened here? This is home, Pete. The criminals are gone, but the good people are still here. Why should I let Graham Dalton and Elise drive me away from the life I built? What about work? I smiled. Turns out the FBI wants to establish a permanent cyber surveillance office in Maine. Someone needs to run it. Someone with experience in hotel security and money laundering investigations? Something like that. Pete grinned. So you're staying? I'm staying. Sunday morning, I stood in my empty house on Maple Street, planning the renovations that would make it truly mine. New furniture, new paint, new memories to replace the ones that had been corrupted by betrayal. My phone rang. Agent Reynolds. Luke, I wanted to give you the final numbers. The grand jury returned indictments against 23 defendants. The cartel investigation netted 47 arrests across 6 states. The judicial corruption probe led to reforms in court administration that will prevent this kind of conspiracy in the future. What about restitution? Full recovery of your stolen funds plus damages. Graham's assets, the judge's pensions, and the cartel's forfeited accounts total $4.2 million. After legal fees and victim compensation, you're looking at a substantial settlement. How substantial? Enough to buy a bigger house or a small hotel. I laughed. I think I'll stick with home automation. After hanging up, I walked through each room of my house, planning its transformation. The master bedroom would become a home office. The dining room would be converted to a workshop for my legitimate security business. The living room would get a bigger television and comfortable furniture for hosting friends. The surveillance equipment would stay, but now it would protect my home instead of gathering evidence against my wife. Monday morning brought a knock at my door. A young woman in a business suit holding a briefcase and looking nervous. Mr. Harper? I'm Sarah Chen, Vanessa's sister. I wondered if I could speak with you. I invited her in, curious. Vanessa had been one of Elise's closest friends and biggest enablers. I wanted to apologize for my sister's role in what happened to you. She knew about the affair from the beginning, and she helped spread the domestic violence rumors. Why are you telling me this? Sarah opened her briefcase and produced a thick folder. Because I recorded every conversation Vanessa had about you and your wife. I knew she was lying, and I documented everything. Why? Because my sister has been destroying people with gossip and lies for years. I thought someday someone would need proof of what she really is. I reviewed the transcripts Sarah had prepared. Vanessa's conversations with Elise, planning the domestic violence narrative. Her calls to mutual friends, spreading carefully crafted lies about my behavior. Her coordination with Graham's office to time the restraining order for maximum impact. What do you want me to do with this? Whatever you think is right. Vanessa helped destroy your marriage and nearly destroyed your life. Maybe it's time someone held her accountable. That afternoon, I forwarded Sarah's evidence to the FBI. Vanessa Chen was indicted the following week on charges of conspiracy and obstruction of justice. Tuesday evening, I received an unexpected phone call. Elise calling from federal prison. Luke, please don't hang up. You have 2 minutes. I wanted to say I'm sorry. Really, truly sorry. Not because I got caught, but because I hurt you. You didn't deserve what I did. No, I didn't. Can you ever forgive me? I thought about that question. Really thought about it. Elise, forgiveness isn't something you can ask for. It's something the other person gives when they're ready. Maybe someday I'll forgive you, but I'll never trust you again, and I'll never forget what you did. I understand. Do you? Do you really understand that you didn't just cheat on me? You tried to destroy my life, my reputation, my career. You were willing to send me to prison for crimes I didn't commit. Silence. Then quietly, yes, I understand. Then we have nothing more to talk about. I hung up and blocked her number. 6 months later, I stood in the federal courthouse in Portland for the final chapter of the Blue Hour conspiracy. Graham Dalton's trial had lasted 3 weeks, with testimony from dozens of witnesses and evidence that filled 2 conference rooms. The jury deliberated for 4 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all counts. Judge Patricia Wells, one of the few local judges not compromised by Graham's network, delivered the sentences with barely contained anger. Mr. Dalton, you corrupted the very foundation of our legal system. You turned justice into a commodity to be bought and sold. The damage you've done to public trust will take decades to repair. Graham stood silently as she sentenced him to 18 years in federal prison, followed by 5 years of supervised release. His law license was permanently revoked, his assets forfeited, his reputation destroyed. Judge Morrison received 12 years. Prosecutor Williams got 10. The other defendants received sentences ranging from 3 to 8 years, depending on their level of involvement. Only Elise had avoided trial through her cooperation agreement. She was already serving her 3-year sentence at a minimum security facility in Connecticut. After the sentencing, I met with Jennifer Dalton outside the courthouse. She'd attended every day of the trial, watching her former husband's complete destruction with quiet satisfaction. "How do you feel?" she asked. "Complete," I said. "Justice was served, the criminals are in prison, and I can finally move on with my life." "Any regrets? About exposing the conspiracy?" "None. About my marriage ending? That was Elise's choice, not mine." Jennifer smiled. "I heard you're opening a new business. Harper Security Solutions, legitimate cybersecurity consulting for businesses and government agencies. No more undercover work, no more surveillance operations." "Sounds peaceful." Peaceful is underrated. That evening, Pete threw a celebration party at O'Malley's pub. The entire neighborhood turned out. Rita and her husband, Detective Naylor, Sarah Chen, Jennifer and her kids, and dozens of friends who'd supported me through the investigation and trial. "To Luke Harper," Pete announced, raising his beer. "The man who proved that crime doesn't pay, corruption has consequences, and good guys can still win." The crowd cheered. I looked around the room at these people who'd become my real family, chosen, loyal, and trustworthy in ways my marriage never was. "To all of you," I replied, "for showing me what real friendship looks like." Later that night, I walked home through the quiet streets of my neighborhood. The house on Maple Street was truly mine now, renovated, redecorated, and filled with new memories. The surveillance equipment remained, but now it protected rather than investigated. I checked my email before bed and found a message from Agent Reynolds. "Luke, wanted to let you know the cartel investigation you started has resulted in 127 arrests across 8 states and the seizure of $47 million in drug money. Your surveillance data was the key to breaking their entire East Coast operation. Well done." I smiled and closed the laptop. Operation Blue Hour was finally, completely over. Sunday morning brought an unexpected visitor, a teenage girl I didn't recognize, standing nervously on my front porch. "Mr. Harper? I'm Emma Morrison, Judge Morrison's daughter." I studied her face, seeing the family resemblance. "What can I do for you, Emma?" "I wanted to apologize for what my father did, and to thank you." "Thank me?" "For stopping him. My dad has been taking bribes for years. Our family lived on dirty money, and I didn't know how to make it stop. When you exposed everything, it was horrible, but also relieving." "What will you do now?" "I got a scholarship to the University of Maine. I'm going to study criminal justice. I want to help fix the system my father broke." "That's a good goal." Emma handed me an envelope. "This is from my mom. She wanted you to have it." After Emma left, I opened the envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter from Judge Morrison's wife. Mr. Harper, I know my husband's crimes caused you tremendous pain, but I want you to know that exposing his corruption was the best thing that could have happened to our family. We've been living a lie for years, and now we can finally start over with the truth. Thank you for having the courage to do what was right, even when it cost you everything. Sincerely, Margaret Morrison. I folded the letter and put it in my desk drawer, next to similar notes from other victims of the conspiracy who'd found the courage to rebuild their lives. Monday morning, I opened Harper Security Solutions in a small office downtown. My first client was the Blue Heron Hotel, ironic, considering its role in my personal drama. The new management wanted a complete security overhaul to distance themselves from the money laundering scandal. Mr. Harper, the general manager said, we want the most secure hotel in New England. Can you do that? I can do that. Tuesday brought news that Vanessa Chen had been sentenced to 2 years in federal prison for her role in the conspiracy. Sarah Chen called to thank me for pursuing charges against her sister. Vanessa finally has to face consequences for her actions, Sarah said. Maybe prison will teach her that other people's lives aren't her entertainment. Wednesday afternoon, I received a call from the Maine State Police. They wanted to hire Harper Security Solutions to investigate cybercrime cases across the state. We need someone who understands both the technical and criminal aspects, Detective Captain Williams explained. Your work on the Blue Hour case was exactly what we need. I'd be happy to help. Thursday evening, I had dinner with Jennifer Dalton and her children. Her real estate business was thriving. Apparently, being the ex-wife of a convicted criminal gave her a certain credibility with clients who'd been burned by corrupt professionals. The kids are doing well, she reported. Therapy is helping them understand that their father's crimes weren't their fault. What about you? I'm dating again, a nice accountant who's never been indicted for anything. That's a good quality in a man. Friday night, I sat in my renovated living room, reading a book and enjoying the silence. No surveillance feeds to monitor, no criminal conspiracies to unravel, no unfaithful wife to investigate. Just peace, quiet, and the satisfaction of a job well done. My phone rang. Agent Reynolds. Luke, I have an interesting proposition. The FBI is creating a new cybercrime task force for New England. We need someone to head the main office. I'm done with federal work. This would be different. No undercover operations, no surveillance stings, just straight cybercrime investigation. Fraud, identity theft, ransomware, clean work with regular hours. I'll think about it. Take your time. The offer stands whenever you're ready. Saturday morning, I drove to the federal prison in Connecticut where Elise was serving her sentence. I hadn't planned to visit, hadn't even thought about it until I found myself in the parking lot, staring at the concrete walls and razor wire. In the end, I didn't go inside. There was nothing left to say, no closure to be gained from seeing her in prison clothes. The woman I'd married was gone, replaced by a stranger who'd chosen crime over love, betrayal over loyalty. I drove home to Maine, to my real life, to the future I was building without her. Sunday evening, I hosted a barbecue in my backyard. Pete brought beer, Rita brought dessert, Jennifer brought her kids, and Detective Naylor brought stories from his 30 years in law enforcement. You know what I like about this case? Naylor said as we sat around the fire pit. It proves the system can still work. Criminals got caught, justice was served, and the good guys won. The good guys don't always win, I replied. No, but this time they did, and sometimes that's enough. As my friends headed home, I stood alone in my backyard, looking up at the stars. The blue hour, that transitional time between day and night, had passed. Dawn was coming, bringing new possibilities, new challenges, and new opportunities to make a difference. Graham Dalton was in federal prison, his criminal empire destroyed. Judge Morrison was disgraced and incarcerated. Elise was serving her sentence, finally facing consequences for her choices. The conspiracy that had corrupted Maine's legal system was broken, its leaders punished, its victims compensated. Justice had been served, completely and without compromise. I walked back into my house, locked the door, and set the security system. Tomorrow would bring new cases, new challenges, and new opportunities to protect the innocent and punish the guilty. But tonight, for the first time in 2 years, I slept peacefully, knowing that the blue hour was finally over.